webinar today, Customer Success, the right way, right people, right role. I know some folks are still getting situated on the my name is Tracy Wick, and I lead the Sales Talent Management part of GrowthPlay's business. GrowthPlay is the leading research-based sales effectiveness consulting and training firm. And today's topic is very hot, customer success. There's probably nothing that I get asked about more these days with customer success. So I'm excited to share some of our observations and to hear from one of our clients about how they've cracked this code, if you will. A couple of points as we get started here. Ideally, we would be sitting across from one another and I could see your face and understand if you had a question, but we're not. And this is today's modern age, so we're going to rely on the Q&A function to do that. So you're going to be muted and not be able to, so you don't have to worry about muting your phones or your computers. But if you do have a question, we definitely want to hear from you. This webinar has been designed with you in mind. So just hit the Q&A function, raise your hand, tell us your question, and we will get your questions answered as we go. Okay. So with me today is Blythe Kazmersak. Blythe is the EVP of HR Solutions for Axios HR. Axios is a client, and Blythe and I, like I said, customer success is a very hot topic. And as we were working with one another over the past couple of months, we were sharing just our insights about this topic, both how we have contended with it from our own business point of view, but also that we're just being asked to talk about it and how we've been able to apply some new thinking to how we run our businesses. And so she's going to be sharing, I'll get a little bit deeper in with Blythe here with an example of how she's applied this at Axios inside of the value chain of her particular offering. So today we're going to give the context, which is a noisy, crowded marketplace. I think that's the best way of describing it. And inside of the noisy, crowded marketplace that we're all competing, how do you create, it doesn't mean we still don't have to create happy customers, because we do. And then along the lines of creating happy customers, GrowthPlay, while a sales effectiveness organization, has a deep expertise in the talent part of sales. And so we're going to look at some best in class frameworks about how you create a customer success function inside of your organizations, but we're going to take a deeper dive into the people side and look at talent as a differentiator and hear how Axios has done that inside of their business. And the reason that I think this is an important place to begin is the SaaS organizations are definitely leading, some of the bigger organizations, there's a lot about this in the market, are leading the conversations and setting up customer success functions within inside of their organizations. But not all of us have that luxury. We don't all have the ability, because of the size of our organization, to dedicate an entire customer success team worldwide. And so if we can't do that, what's a way that we could actually make a difference in creating this happy customer? And the biggest lever that we have seen is both our research and research from the literature review would say that talent as a differentiator is one way of doing that. And it's a way that any organization, regardless of size, can opt in. So you'll be hearing about that. And then the last, of course, is, nothing's perfect. There's always a challenge, no matter where you are, with implementing and making this come alive. So what do we mean by a noisy, crowded marketplace? Well, I think it's an interesting place to consider that if you think about sales and you think about customers, customers have more agency today than they've ever had about how they buy our products. And I think this is true no matter whether you're selling B2B or B2C. And what I mean is, by agency, is they have more choices about how they buy, where they buy, when they buy, from whom they buy, and these choices are in each category. I was hearing today when I was on my update and on the way to work that CNBC was saying that something like 74% of all customers polled, some of you might have seen this statistic, would opt to buy from Amazon if they had a choice. Now, I didn't dig into the research about it, but I think that that particular viewpoint is permeating every aspect of how we go to market. And so in this noisy, crowded marketplace with customers having a lot of agency over how they buy, it's also important to understand, and Forrester talks a lot about this, that we live in a subscription economy. And so a subscription economy is different, even if you're not, we happen to, Growthplay has sold subscriptions, but let's say you didn't. You're still in a different framework in today's world based on this, because the economic value of a customer relationship is not monetized upfront necessarily, but over time. And this means that the duration of a relationship has greater impact on the company's health, and so getting that relationship right is really important. So in the age of the customer, the mission of the customer success organization is shifting, and you see a lot of this, to begin to think about how to proactively engage with their customers across the life cycle of that relationship and have them realize the business value from their application, regardless of what the application is. So again, even if you're not, part of why Blythe and I decided to talk about this is we hear from our customers, even if they don't sell some subscription-based services, they're being impacted by this, and they're being required by their customers to think different about how they organize. And the way to increase your retention and your revenue is really to think about this from a very different point of view than you probably have in the past. So that's kind of the macro, kind of the business challenge that we're all solving with customer success. So happy customers, we all have to have happy customers. That's not a news flash to anyone on the call. But I think that we have to talk about what does that mean. And so happy customers, it's no longer a discrete event, is how I would say it, that we're referring to. Rather, it is an engagement with your product or your service that is delighting the customer over time. It's creating value for the customer over time. So what's interesting, and you'll hear this, I think both from Growthplay's perspective, you're probably living it, those of us, on this webinar, but also from Axios, is that expertise now has a premium in delighting customers that it never had before. It used to be, and if you think about some of the ways we've organized to serve customers, you have customer success versus customer service versus account management versus customer experience. All these sometimes are used interchangeably when they really shouldn't be, because what you're really talking about is an expertise that is going to have the client, the customer, your customers, whoever they are, really receive value in each interaction. And this is no small feat, by the way. I think those of us that are involved in customer success know that this is no small feat. It's a very challenging thing that we all have to do. So what are the 4 steps that, and this is from Forrester's executive summary on customer success, what are the 4 steps that customer success, if you're stacking up a function, right, what do you have to do? Well, it seems, if you just look at a slide here, I always love slides like this that tell, it's a visual 4 steps. It seems easy, but it really isn't, right? Because each of these is an entire world unto themselves. So first, start by articulating your customer engagement strategy. So this is interesting because we probably have all had customer engagement strategies in our past, but if you're taking what I just said, that noisy, crowded marketplace, everybody has an opportunity to buy a subscription somehow, right? 74% of us, if we could, would buy through Amazon. That's probably even some of the things we're selling. What is your customer engagement strategy inside of that kind of the noisy, crowded marketplace? It's probably different, and you'll hear again from Blythe, very different than it used to be. Then from there, again, this is the strategy question, you have to focus on the right process for each of these customer engagements, because the value chain and the creation over time, remember, it's not a discrete event, it's the lifetime of the relationship. And so it has to look different, the types of process, the types of workflow. And then what that leads to, the next part, is about the right data to drive the right conversation. Now, we're experts in data around talent, but there's lots of interesting work being done, Forrester for sure, Gainsight. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening around the data and how you look at data differently than you did in the past about the right conversation. And, you know, that comes in the land, the expand, the renew, adopt conversations. We may do another series on that, but right now, what we're going to talk about is the one that, again, you have the most leverage with, which is organizing your people and hiring for success. So why do I say that? Well, everybody, if you kind of take a step back, regardless of your size and regardless of your market, you could really stop the action and answer a very simple question about, in the value chain of your particular product and service, what is the core purpose of the customer success, the job itself? Whether you're talking about in smaller companies, you probably might just have a person or a group of people. In bigger companies, you obviously have job families. And they're not all the same, right? So you have to think, well, do I need them to adopt? That's a big piece of where the expertise starts to come in. Or am I kind of thinking more traditionally the way we have in the past about cross-selling, upselling? What about customer retention? How about general questions and complaints, or resolving technical questions? So what you'll start to see here is that if you can isolate, and this, by the way, we're doing a customer success research study right now. These are questions that we've listed from the study. We really want to start to understand, how are you looking at your core purpose of your customer success role? If you can get really clear about this, then you can start to think about the next part, which is, how do you organize for success? And if you are understanding that not all customer success roles are the same, you really have to have the sense of, what am I trying to accomplish with this interaction with the client? Then you can start to have, which, by the way, I think this is probably the #1 challenge that I hear from customers, is there's a lot of people overlapping, drop balls. People aren't really sure who should be doing what. There's double quotas, you know, for retention and renewals and things like that. But if you don't understand the first part, which is the core purpose of the role, it's very challenging to start to organize people for the success in terms of how they all work together. Okay, let me stop and just ask Blythe, as you hear what I'm saying here, I think this is a good time to kind of introduce, just like kind of high level, who Axios is, and then I'm going to talk to you about how you've kind of cracked this code of, do you know what makes your customers happy? Because I think you were very rigorous, Blythe, in understanding the core purpose of your role, and then I think you got really clear about how is it that your customers across the life cycle of their engagement with Axios were really clear about what it is that would make them happy. Let me just move up here.
Yeah, so just a bit about Axios is we are centered on supporting small business, somewhere between 5 and 100 employees that are based in Michigan. We're an HR outsourcing company, and we basically sell a software platform that's a full service HR platform, but we wrap it with a bunch of services and add-on products. So from the concept of a subscription economy, our clients basically buy our services as a package, and our challenge is really getting them to utilize all the stuff in that bundle. So as you think about how do you make clients happy, and we support all kinds of different clients from a size, industry, geography, culture perspective, and so their needs can look very different, and they evolve over time as they grow, or as things change, or as the economy moves, or their clients change. And so one of the first things that I did when I got here, I've been at Axios about 4 years, was to figure out what did value look for our customer. And one of the things I started to realize is small business owners don't have time to learn HR jargon. And so we came up with a very simple framework of, if you're a small business owner, what are the 5 things that you basically have to worry about related to your people? So this framework that you see below is really what came out of listening to clients and sorting out what they always seem to gravitate to. So what were they spending on their total cost of employment, not just their payroll costs, but all the other administrative and insurance and all those other costs. So what was that total spend? The next one was more for small business owners. Compliance has really grown tremendously complex because our federal government isn't functional. Everything is kind of moved to state level decision making, making it very hard for employers to navigate what's the rule in this county or city or state, and how is it different, and a lot of more narrow specific applications of compliance. So small business owners are really worried about, did they have any kind of boogeymen in the way they were approaching compliance. The third was really around the employee experience. You know, the economy kind of roared back, especially in our market, and talent is in short supply. And so, you know, there was a real focus on making sure employees were getting their questions answered, feeling supported, and they got, you know, they had a portal to use to get quick answers, but they also had a resource to get more complicated answers taken care of around benefits or a grievance or, you know, something like that. And then the other thing business owners were talking a lot about were they competitive, and did they have the culture that was really going to allow them to grow or accomplish the business objectives they had. And so as we talked to different clients, sometimes they wanted to talk about all of these. Then the challenge with the client is helping them prioritize. But many times they were really centered on 1 or 2 of these. And it was, you could tell they were stewing on it, thinking about it. And so as whether it was a prospect or a current client, this really helped us identify and get into a common expectation around what value looked like for that client. And then as a result, we started to be able to focus our energy around them using the solutions and the things that we had in our toolbox to help them then in that specific area.
So it sounds like this is if we go back up to the slides about the core purpose and then organizing around, you know, the process, this is really the core purpose of what your business owners are looking for. They need to kind of have a viewpoint on these 5 different aspects of talent or their HR function, but they don't really need to be the experts. They're relying on you. Is that a fair summary of how you said it?
Totally. And I think, and which of these was kind of, you know, a hot spot for them at the time, right?
And that's going to be different based on each business, I would imagine, that you're serving.
Yeah, totally. Like very new, young companies who work with a lot of startups, they're literally trying to just, you know, make sure they're not breaking anything, versus a pretty mature business might be really centered on, you know, competing in the market or handling the growth around getting people onboarded quickly, those kinds of things.
Yep. Okay, very good. So then if we look at, if we kind of go back up, I'm jumping through a couple of different slides here. So this answers the question, do you know what makes your customers happy? Because I think that sounds, there's a lot about happiness today, but I think that you've really answered it. Happiness comes from you as the expert. So again, we're kind of unpacking this way of thinking about customer success. Expertise becomes a premium as you engage with your customers, because to your point, each customer, startups are going to have very different need for expertise than if you're a seasoned manufacturer in Western Michigan. So you seem like you've been able to articulate this, get everybody on the same page about these 5, call them the 5 C's, about Axios.
Yeah, and I think there's a whole set of things that we're going to talk about related to the personality of the person that they're interacting with. But if you just think about kind of why do we exist and how do we bring value, this was really the starting point.
Yep. Well, I think if we're talking about how do you build your customer success, I think this is really the cornerstone. So then let's keep unpacking that to your point. Then how do you staff for it? Now you know this is what makes your customers happy. Then let's talk about your service delivery model, and then, you know, walk us through how you've been able to think about the talent piece. But actually, let me go back up here and kind of unpack something I think that's important for folks. So one of the things that we know from our research is everybody's got their opinions. This is kind of, you know, and I think if you get everybody aligned on your value and how you're delivering that value to your customers. Oftentimes when I'm dealing with clients, they have a wish list that's so long it becomes just really useless in terms of helping them understand how they serve their customers, and more importantly, hire. And so what we help people do is really think about, do you understand for sure, are you clear what's impacting the performance, the engagement, the retention, whatever you want, of how you're measuring that customer success function, as well as is it measured? Because there's some things that we all know that can't be measured that are still important to whether or not you hire that individual. And really have a clear sense of what is going to impact and move those numbers for you to retain and grow your business, as opposed to just your opinion. And so what I think has been really kind of fascinating is watching how you've been able to unpack that particular framework with your service delivery model. So why don't you just kind of walk us through that process and how we've been able to partner?
Yeah, so the challenge around our business model is it is pretty broad. When you think about everything in HR, there's lots of different expertise areas. And so one of the challenges we had, when you think about a small business owner, they have a lot of hats they're wearing. They basically want to ask us a question or get direction or have us solve a problem, and they want to talk to one person and have it be done. That's part of our value proposition from an interaction model perspective. Is it should be easy, no friction. This is the thing, ask me what questions you need to ask me, give me an opinion if I need to make a decision, and then just do it, right? And so the challenge of kind of how do you create a interaction model where they can just talk to one person basically. And for us, we couldn't, when I got here, we had a very typical kind of sales and account management function that was very sales focused and then managed the renewal. But as we implemented a cloud-based system, added more complexity to our product offering, it really became important that we had someone that could help the client understand what we really had in that toolbox. We needed a lot more expertise. And what we found was the typical account management profile that was very strong on relationships, but wasn't a deep HR expert, wasn't helping them navigate well. And then we ended up getting feedback from clients that they didn't see the value. And so we started transitioning to the HR business partner, which is a 10 to 15 year person in the HR space that could talk to a business owner and figure out what of the 5 C's were an issue, what their expectations were, and really get to know that business and be that interaction point person. Now, we had a portal that was behind us where you want to drive some of this more transactional stuff to self-service, and we've got other resources that kind of follow up on some of the transactional stuff that comes through there. And then payroll is kind of its own beast because it happens every week or two. It just needed its own interaction point. It usually was with a finance person, so it didn't seem to irritate the business owner. They kind of wanted to have that other person. But everybody else basically funnels through the business partner. So they are, in essence, an HR person, and they're also a customer success manager. They're held accountable not for growing the business, but for having them utilize and be satisfied with our service. And then if you see on the far right where it says Centers of Excellence, we've got a bunch of specialty people and groups that do very specific things. And essentially, the HR business partner is pulling them in or helping them resolve issues as things come up. And so in many ways, there's kind of a bit of a curtain and these people are behind it, and then just they get to come out and demonstrate that expertise in specific situations. So I think the model of a customer success manager in our setting, where we're only 50 employees total and about 25 are focused on this HR service model, we did not have the scale to set up a customer success organization, but the principles and the design and the thought process, we basically had to figure out how to merge with people who were experts in the HR discipline. So that was really where the conversation started with Tracy, where I was trying to figure out how do I turn HR people into customer success people, or how do I change the profile and figure out how to get the folks that are in it to be performing differently. And that was really the challenge in a small business where you're not starting from, you know, a clean slate and looking for new talent. You're really trying to figure out how to take the talent you have and morph it, that team over time to be delivering on this in this model.
Yep, very good. I mean, I think that what you're describing is the world I think most people are living in right now. And again, I think if you think about where all the cutting edge research is being done, it's that the big technology companies, the SaaS providers are really leading the charge because they have I think we're all confronting the same expertise dilemma. They have the ability to set up an entire functional, you know, staff of customer success. It doesn't necessarily really negate the problem of having to hire for experts though, right? Because that's kind of what we're saying here. Across that value, you really have to think about your expertise. And in your case, you know, and this is, I think, true of lots of businesses, regardless of size, you want to look at the people that are standing in the business today and think about how you could deploy their talent differently. So let's take a look at this. So this is the slide that we use in a number of our different presentations, and I thought it was fun when we were preparing for this that you said, typically what we would say is that a dilemma that people have as you're thinking about finding that expert inside your company or outside, that the big mistake you make is looking for the purple unicorn. And the purple unicorn is the individual that's so perfect to be ideal that he or she doesn't exist. But what was fun about the way you described his life is that you actually said, no, Tracy, you've helped me really understand what the purple unicorn is. So let's talk a little bit about that. So you were charged with setting up, you know, this function inside your company, looking at your team, and how did we start to work together to unpack what that means for you, that purple unicorn?
Yeah, so we started with one of the growth play assessment tools and basically had my team go through this assessment. And we had salespeople, this HR team, folks that were doing account management, and we started to understand, you know, what I had is folks in the organization who demonstrated the skills needed to be a customer success manager. And then we had all different levels of expertise. And so we were able to use that assessment. And there was one specific person in my organization that was basically a prototype for what we were talking about. And so I was very interested to see what the results on the assessment showed. And it showed us basically that some of the HR folks I had were not, they did not have some of that raw drive and capacity to do what we were talking about, and some did. And what that really helped me figure out is who on the team was going to be able to be coached to do this and would enjoy it and find joy in the work, and who needed to be moved into a role where they were more playing a different position on the team. They were potentially more of a specialist or more of someone that was providing more operational support versus this customer contact point. And as we benchmarked everybody and started to figure out where the places where we saw the customer retention high and we saw customer feedback strong and lots of testimonials and referenceable clients correlated very strongly with the results on the growth play assessment. And so it really gave us clarity around what our gut was telling us around a person and translated it to a tool that I could use for helping to coach the people we had, as well as to help find new people where we were good at assessing whether they had the HR skills and background, but we weren't yet good at predicting who was going to be interested and coachable around these set of behaviors.
Very good. And so I think that this next slide, I think, kind of unpacks a little bit of what you intuitively know. And so if you think about talent, there's a lot that goes into talent. And if we're talking about organizing your people and hiring for success, you could argue that this is a complete talent portfolio, a viewpoint of the various aspects of what you need to take a look at when you're hiring. And so, you know, personality and intelligence is important, people's values, and they need to align, particularly in today's, you know, there's a whole piece of work I know you and I have talked about purpose and the purpose-driven economy, and how even in, more so today, values and mindset kind of come together with the purpose. Then there's the skill, knowledge, and then ultimately the outer ring is what you just said, is that customer retention, the referenceable clients, all that, kind of the evidence that you've picked the right person. And I think that regardless of whether you work with us, it's really important that you unpack this equation for yourself, because you can be fooled. And I think you said it. You have your gut that you think, I know what is going to make the difference, but is it really? And so I think there's, the Customer Success Association talks about the art and science over the long term. That's how they kind of define customer success as really being applicable here, because you really have to think about these various aspects, because not all is obvious. Some is really easy to see and hard to change, and vice versa. So what I'd like to kind of unpack for you that I found fascinating, because I think this will be interesting for those on the webinar, was the element of curiosity, right? So one of the things that you and I were talking about, which by the way, we don't measure curiosity, so that would probably be, I think it would be probably like a value or a mindset, right, that demonstrates itself in certain ways. But you were talking about how you started to notice that curiosity, and the curiosity about problem solving in particular, had to be something that kind of came in your analysis in this equation as you were organizing your people. So can you just talk about that a little bit, how you came on to that?
Yeah, so if you think about just different profiles of people, there are folks that are experts and they light up when they get to educate somebody else. There's folks that are very relationship oriented and they light up when they get to be in relation with somebody else, right, and form a connection. And either one could be successful in this role. The challenge was, like, if they're coming from a relationship posture, are they curious about how they could, improve that relationship or impact that person differently? Or were they just satisfied with having a good interaction? And then if they're in the expertise posture, were they curious about what did they know that could benefit that other person? Not just let me demonstrate what I know, but really from a perspective of, if at the end of the day we're trying to create something better together, how could my expertise be of use? And so kind of having that orientation about seeing each interaction as an opportunity, and being curious about what it could look like, and not letting it become habitual or repetitive or form assumptions about what your customer wanted, I think was where I saw that authenticity come through to the client, where at the end of the day, we could have spent the same amount of time with clients. We could have had someone who was an expert or was relationship oriented, but when the client left that conversation, they felt like the person they were talking to cared and understood what they were trying to accomplish. And if that gets established, then problem solving gets a lot easier. If you don't get into that, you're kind of throwing stuff against the wall. And so I started to see the people who had that capacity just make progress so much more quickly with clients and build that rapport quickly and start to have an impact much more quickly.
Yes, very, very interesting. So then as you're thinking about hiring, how has this changed how you think about either the types of people that you're looking for, or the types of questions, or the process as you're selecting and recruiting?
Yeah, so I think we have had a hard time. This is a hard role to fill in the entire industry. Time I talk to my peers, they're challenged with finding people who have a strong HR knowledge, but are really centered around this customer orientation and serving multiple customers. And I think what this assessment tool has helped us do in the recruiting process is, when our gut tells us we have somebody who might be aligned, what we've started to do is have them do the assessment and then actually show them the results in the interview and talk through our experience about, a lot of times what people are asking if they're good from a candidate position is, what would make me successful, or what makes someone successful? And using this tool to help them see, these are some of the things that it looks like you have some innate capability. but does this make you happy to do this stuff? Is this something that you're oriented to do? You know, do you enjoy it? And you can start to have an honest conversation about where they would be spending their time and what they would be needing to really grow and develop. And I think there's been some hires that didn't end up coming on board because it became clear to them, even though they could, they didn't want to. And there's others that have come on board, and I think their onboarding has gone so much more quickly because we were just able to communicate at a level of detail and kind of paint a picture that we weren't able to before.
Very good. So you were able to just say, this is what it's going to take, and then the idea of tying that into the happiness factor is really, it sounds like, becomes like that straight line of that equation. And then people are either signed up for it or they're not, but you can now discern that.
Right.
Yeah. So then let me just move to a couple more slides and then there's a couple questions I'm going to talk about here. So talent analytics, which obviously we have a piece of our business as talent analytics, is really kind of what you're talking about, whether you use us or you talk someplace else, I think. And again, if you go back to any of the research about customer success, what's exciting as a research firm at Growth Play leading this endeavor, we see research as being integral to your decisions, and we call it the evidence that you need, right? So data and analysis to inform decisions. It's just how. It's how and what. Analytics means using data and analysis, and particularly there's not a magic behind it, but what's great about customer success now is that there's more opportunity to align on this. So how were you able to, so curiosity is one piece, but using the talent analytics piece with us, how have you kind of shifted just analytics in general as you're hiring? Is it sooner in the process? Is it later in the process? Because I think that's a question we get asked a lot, like, where do I plug this in? People see the need for it, but I think oftentimes people are struggling with at what stage, particularly in a tight market like you're describing, do they start using this analysis? So help us understand from your point of view how you've been able to do that.
Yeah, so our process is the recruiter does a pre-screen, it gets to the hiring manager, we have the first conversation, interview. If that interview goes well, as a follow-up to that interview, we have them do the assessment, and then we'll come back together and go through it. And really, as a result of that, there may be a couple other folks we want them to meet, but at that point, what I found personally is I'm clear on whether they're a good fit or not. What I'm assessing in that second conversation is it what they want? Are they going to stay, right? Is it going to be a fit from what they're interested in? So the first conversation, the pre-screening is more like skills, qualifications, salary match, that kind of thing. That second, the first interview with the hiring team is more, are they a good fit for the job? And then the third one is really able to use this assessment to validate what we thought we saw in the interview, yes or no. And then if it does match, kind of go back to the candidate and make sure we're aligned around expectations.
Yep. Very good. So we would call that the key to successful selection, right? Which is to identify the natural strengths, which we measure with our tool, and then understand, to your point, kind of what differentiates in that particular position. Okay, as we're wrapping up here, because we've got a couple more minutes, I've got a question here. I am a mid-sized employer in the Midwest. Not thought about this customer service. What is one piece of advice that you would give to get started? I love those questions. So, Blythe, you were that person for us. What's the one for this person here in the Midwest? What would you say? One thing to get started, right? Because take one action today and you can unlock a new world. So what would you advise this particular person to do?
I'm someone who is kind of like an action-based learning. If I spend too much time in my office, I get in trouble. And so literally I get off track. And so my point was to pick a client that I thought was a prototypical client who would engage with me and start to define what, like I really had the opportunity to have them interact, and there was enough of a meaty problem for them to spend time with me. And I used it to figure out what that value looked like. Is once you get the value part clarified, translating it to the jobs isn't easy, but you're on the path. If the value chain isn't clear, it's really hard, because at that point you're putting solutions in place, but the problem or the requirements are unclear. So that was my place to start, and I just picked doing it with a client so I could engage and get in a, it wasn't perfect, but I probably got to 80% with that one client, and then I started to test my assumptions that came out of that with my other clients until I felt like I'd landed at it.
Very good. What is the biggest challenge in implementing a customer success role? So that seems like that's an entire research publication and probably another webinar. So let's kind of reduce it down. So what's a challenge that you encountered along the way? I know you already talked about just the war for talent, if you will, but anything else you'd add to that from a challenge perspective?
I mean, this is disruptive. Like, the account management function was all riled up. Sales was riled up. Operations was riled up. There were kind of new lines drawn, processes that had to get worked. And so there was some messy stuff in there where we decided we had to carve out implementation as separate. And so just getting to that detail around process and role design was hard work. And there was a lot of change management, and there were some folks that chose to get off the bus because we moved too much cheese. And there were other folks that were very engaged by it and saw it as an opportunity for them to build something. But those organizations go through those phases, and I would say this was part of a broader change process, but this was particularly, totally new expectations for a set of HR people, and then a bunch of other roles had to adapt as well. And so that change process, don't underestimate it. That was challenging.
It always is. But over time, I think, as I've watched this unfold, I mean, that's part of why I was excited to have you speak, you've definitely seen your metrics go in the direction that you wanted, right? I mean, it was a little challenging at front, but your metrics are consistent with this kind of hanging in there with this approach, correct?
Yeah, we started to just get much more positive feedback from our clients. At first, they were kind of annoyed. There was confusion around who they're talking to. There was, situations where we set expectations that didn't get met because we didn't yet have the right people in the role. I mean, all those kind of normal, unfortunate, but normal things that happen when you're doing a rollout like this. And I think over time, we started to get much more consistent feedback from our clients around us nailing what we said we would do. And from a retention perspective, we've seen it increase. I think we were at about 90% client retention, and now we're above 95. Very good.
Well, with that, it is now 11:45 my time. I know, Blythe, you're East Coast, so depending on your time zone, I just would like to thank you, Blythe, for sharing your insights today. I'd like to appreciate those on the webinar. A couple different things. We are going to be sending out the slides as well as the recording to folks on the call. We do have a customer success research that we're doing, which is also on LinkedIn. Make sure you sign up for that, because I think it's more expansive than just talking about organizing for success and hiring the right people. But let us know if there's any questions, because Blythe and I that we didn't get a chance to answer today, we'd be happy to kind of take those offline. So with that, thanks everyone. Have a great day, and again, we appreciate your time today, and we will be back with, I think, another series. We've been asked again for part 2 of this, so stay tuned.
Happy spring.